Thank you so much for staying for this talkback. My name is Grace, and on behalf of the Blue Barn, we are so grateful that all of you are here for this fantastic production. And we are incredibly grateful to this wonderful panel of civic leaders in Nebraska for being here tonight. We have representatives from Civic Nebraska and the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. And they will introduce themselves and tell you what their roles are, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what tonight's talkback is going to be like. Tonight is about the constitutional rights with a focus on women, LGBTQIA2S+ issues, and BIPOC issues. We invite you to ask questions, so if anything is in your brain, anything at all, for these individuals who specialize in this area, we welcome you to ask. If you have burning questions for the cast and director, we will have another talkback next Thursday, I believe it's in your program, February 9th. And all of our engagement events are open and free to the public, so you're welcome to come back. We also will have Heidi Schreck, the playwright, coming the final weekend of the show for a talkback, and you're welcome to come talk with her as well. So we invite you back, but for tonight, please keep questions for the actors for another time and focus on these wonderful people. And I'd like to introduce Karina, who will be moderating for us. So Karina, I'll let you go for it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Karina Hernandez. I am the Director at Large for the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Chueqa. I work at Civic Nebraska, and I'm the voting rights organizing coordinator. Specifically in the voting rights team, we advocate for good policies and oppose bad policies to make sure that our elections are fair, accessible, and free.
I'm Bridget Claborn, and I'm the fundraising director with the League of Women Voters.
My name is Sarah Walker. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Development, partner in crime with Chueqa. We both have Civic Nebraska.
My name is Jenny Synowiecki. I'm the one of two public policy directors on the League of Women Voters of Omaha, and I focus on policy within Omaha city government.
Hi everyone, my name is Henning, she, her. I am Vice President for the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha.
And I'm Duckworth, she, her. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for being here with me today. So I have a list of questions, everyone, but this is a talkback, so I really want to invite you all to come up with your own questions that you have for them and raise your hand and I'll call on you. My first question is a hot dog a sandwich? No. What can we, the people, do to make a difference and make our voices heard?
Sure. I feel like to be an advocate, and what does advocacy mean, right? Like, what are policies, what are things that you want to see in your community, what does the community look like to you, and does that include people who, does that include Black, BIPOC people, Indigenous people, disabled people, trans people, queer people, all of the above. Yeah, I don't know who to say answer my question.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
Always.
Yeah. Linda.
So say it again.
So what can we, the people, do to make a difference?
Yeah.
And to make our voices heard?
Right. So right now, I just have to say that every year, especially since we have the state league, we have the National League of Women Voters in the state and the local. But every year, I'm also involved in this. We're all active with the state as well, and meaning that it's important to us to know what our legislators, our state senators in Nebraska are up to. And I have to say that every year, starting in January, I start to get nervous. What are they going to do? What kind of laws are they going to pass? And so always paying way more attention than I want to do about that. I want to do for that. But it makes me feel good to know that I have contacted my senator, or in the case of bills right now being heard before committees, it's our right and our duty, it's certainly our right to contact all the members of a particular committee and say, do not advance that bill, or do advance that bill, or that sort of thing. But of course, that also means paying attention. So that to me is an important little something that I can do, is to be very aware of what's out there. And this also, of course, concerns city government, just like Jenny was saying. And then national government, there's a lot to do, right? So that's sort of my answer. I don't know if it makes any sense at all, but somebody will do that.
I'll add to
Yeah.
that. I think
Okay.
knowing who your representation is, and especially following city, I feel like city government, or city council, city plan, inner workings tend to kind of fall under the radar. And I don't know where the fallout is. And maybe that's a question for you, whether or not you feel like there's enough information that gets out there from our city government. Do you feel informed about our city government? I feel like that falls under the radar, and when I talk to people, they don't necessarily know much about city council person, what the city council does. So, yeah,
Including me, thanks, Jenny.
yeah, but
What is your understanding that the legislature may do in compromising the amendment to the Constitution requiring identification to vote versus the ability to vote by mail, absentee, those kinds of things? How is that legislation?
I wrote that question for him. Okay. Thank you. That was a great lead in. Well, I think that Chueqa does it kind of. Chueqa. Do you want to answer that? Because
I think we all can answer.
I agree. But I'll let you go ahead with that, but that is absolutely, that was just a few days ago. Were you there testifying?
I was there in support, but yeah, there was a lot of people at the Capitol testifying against that bill. We were unaware that there are 4 voter ID bills that are in occurring at the legislative session. Sorry, what's the question again? So I'm a little nervous.
Well, the real question is, how is the legislature going to balance drafting legislation that is consistent with the constitutional amendment that requires voter ID when, if I'm voting from home with my mail, how can there be legislation that's going to require me to present voter ID?
They're going to have you notarize it. You have to,
Yeah, so
you have to see a notary.
Yeah, this,
That's one of the bills. That was the bill
Okay, that was,
on Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day that was.
that's what they're working on within
Yeah.
the legislature on what that's
so
going to
we'll
look like.
still
It's still up in, it's still a draft.
It is a draft.
by
Yeah.
mail, you would have to find some notary to appear in front of that would verify your ID.
That's one of the proposals right now.
We're
That's
fighting
what they're
That's why.
figuring out in the legislature right now. Yeah.
and let's be clear too that the League of Women Voters and Civic Nebraska oppose voter ID in
So, do you feel like that what we were voting on last fall was very misdirectional on like what actually people are voting on, and like, I feel like, oh, I was taking away my right? Or
Yeah,
how do you feel about that?
I think there was a lot of miseducation, a lot of misinformation,
Yes,
a lot of
that's always fun,
propaganda,
yeah.
a lot of concern, and I think for it to be on, and think about how it was funded, right? And for it to be on the ballot, that's something to be to question. It's millions and millions of, I don't know how much was funded to hire people to gather signatures, right? And most of the time when those signature gatherers were doing that, they were doing it illegally and not going by the rules. I don't know if that
Yeah,
explain
no,
that.
that'd be correct.
And so they were, I don't know.
And well,
I thought it was very misleading.
Yeah.
Very misleading.
Somebody asked me just the other day, I thought we voted for that, so now what? And they just thought it was sort of, anyway, the deal is, the reason we're talking about it in the legislature, because the legislature has to figure out what that looks like. because they could make it not so bad. It could even be, I think it could even be just like a signature, right? This is your ID.
Yep, and so right now.
And it won't be that easy, I know.
And there are several bills right now that are being debated. Specifically, so Nebraska's taken a position that voter ID is bad. We didn't want it. We worked really hard to get out education in the capacity that we could do as a 501c3 organization. Because you have to start thinking about lobbying laws and how to work around that. I would definitely suggest anyone who's concerned about this, the bill that has not gone to hearing yet is LB 675. This is what we consider to be the less bad voter ID bill, introduced by Senator Jen Day. And so it's less restrictive. It also has provisions in there that we're kind of trying to even out the bad thing that just happened, that maybe people voted on something, because unfortunately voter ID feels like common sense legislation. When you ask people if they want legislations to be secure, people say, yeah, that sounds great. You have to have a driver's license to vote or to drive. Like, why would you not need it to go vote? You know, this just feels very common sense to people. But once you start pulling back what this actually looks like when it's implemented, when we talk about who are the people who work at the polls, what kind of training are they given? We already have a poll worker shortage across, not only in our state, but across the country. So people are really concerned about how are these people going to be qualified, whether or not to say, is this a valid ID or not? And then what kind of IDs are going to be accepted? Are we going to have narrow requirements on photo IDs? Like, it has to be a state issued by the state of Nebraska. You know, I just bought a house and I was like, we should change our ID because if this is going to take place, I want to be able to vote in the Lincoln municipal elections that are coming up. It cost me and my wife both $17 each to get a new ID, you know, and our IDs weren't expired, by the way. That would have not happened for a few years. So, I mean, I'm really grateful to say, like, we were able to do 17 times 2. But, like, that really disenfranchises so many more people than folks think. The other considerations, too, are folks who don't need IDs anymore. Or, like me, I was a young person. I walked around. I swear I moved every single year I was in college. And my ID never matched where I lived. This is really going to hurt young folks, and specifically folks for very valid reasons. They don't have state issue documentation. What's your question in the back?
So I've done work in Fremont, and kind of the biggest thing there was trying to create more understanding and awareness on how to get more people in Latino, Hispanic space to vote. So I guess where are you guys at in thought process, because with photo ID, because the biggest thing was how do we get people to feel comfortable to go show out and go vote? What I'm hearing, this is very reactionary to last election, trying to fix corruption. What are we doing to figure out just how to figure out how do we get more people to get out and vote, make them feel comfortable and safe to go out and vote? That's my question.
That's a good question. For example, it's really hard for me to even say that we are a proponent of any voter ID bill, but this voter ID bill by Jen Day has put in some provisions that we kind of feel like are wins. Like, what amazing would it be, like automatic voter registration? Every 18-year-old in the state of Nebraska gets to automatically be registered to vote. That seems really simple, right? But we know that there are so many eligible voters versus what the registered voting population is. Other proactive legislation, I know Chueqa and team work really, really hard on, also LEAP has come out in support of this, is provisions that unnecessarily restrict the right to vote. Like for folks who have been systems impacted, folks who have served, had a felony conviction, in the state of Nebraska, we are one of the most restrictive states at this point in this juncture in history, that we require folks, even after fulfilling their mandatory sentence in prison, and that's a whole other issue of itself, they can't vote for 2 years. And that's just insane to me that we're asking someone to feel like they're a part of society, but you cannot participate meaningfully for 2 years, you know? So I think what we have to do is, the amendment happened on the referendum, it passed. It passed by 65%. It was kind of an overwhelming win on that side. But we have to kind of think about what are the pro-voter-centric policies that can get folks out to vote, make it a little less hard to vote. I don't know.
So as Jenny was saying, you know, make sure you know who your representative is. And I bet if you can go ahead and raise your hands if you want, but I bet everybody here knows who their state senator is. And if you don't, it's easy to look it up, of course. But to do that and to know and to understand the issues. I know a lot of people feel like they'd like to know more, and here's a chance to put in a plus for our we have a television show, the League of Women Voters does. It's on,
Yeah.
maybe Karina would like to talk about that because
Sure.
she's producer or co-producer.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's called Go Vote Omaha, and we talk to local community leaders, like folks from Civic, Nebraska, let's say, on issues that are affecting all of you. So if you would like to go watch that, it's called Go Vote Omaha, and you can see it on YouTube, or you can see it on Channel 22 on Tuesdays. So just more information for you, not only on issues, but if you need education on voting, or anything like that. So,
Was it recently or legislative? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Corner.
Yeah.
Top corner.
This is kind of an unrelated question to the voting discussion, so feel free to come back to it later. But earlier you were talking about getting involved, becoming an advocate, volunteering. What if it can be kind of hard to find those opportunities. For example, I'm very, very passionate about action against sexual violence and anything like that. There was actually a bill or law passed by Senator Moorfield and Senator Hunter that had to do with my case. And in Lincoln, there's Voices of Omaha, and that's a volunteer opportunity for domestic violence and sexual violence and actually supporting those women. Meanwhile, I feel like in Omaha, that's a much harder thing to find, which is difficult when that's the thing that I want to be doing.
So you're asking how would we meaningfully get involved in these
Yeah.
things that we all care about something and that's
Yeah.
your specific.
I don't know if the Women's Center does like active work. The first thing that, sorry, you probably know.
No, so in my day job, not my volunteer gig, I work in domestic violence, sexual assault services. And I think that one of the hard things about that particular topic and like doing volunteering is that we're protecting people's confidentiality. As you know, with your own case, people have different levels of comfortability, like talking about it, period. I actually think that the play did a really good job talking about the experience of domestic violence in a family. I think for me, also coming like from a family that had DV happening in it, I also, back to your first question about how to be an advocate, like I do think it starts in your personal life with what's going on. And so first off, props to you for being involved in that legislation, like that is how you get involved in that issue. I think that I found like it valuable working in the space. However, I also think that when you have like a professional service that feels kind of like a medical service, like it doesn't always feel super activisty. And so I really miss actually like being an undergrad and being involved in what I like the campus sexual assault advocacy happening, because that felt more grassroots and more activist than like kind of the professional services I'm involved in now. So I don't know, not a great answer, but I think that with any topic you care about, there's kind of like a professional way to be involved in it, which a lot of us up here that have jobs in the nonprofit or like community engagement kind of space are in, but it's also so vital to like be engaged in it again in your personal life and in like direct action, mutual aid, and other forms of advocacy, which again, it sounds like you're already really involved in. It sounded like Jenny was gonna maybe talk about the Women's Center for Advancement. I know the Women's Fund of Omaha also has a like speakers bureau. I think it's called Survivors Rising.
Okay.
That seems kind of like a formalized group of people doing more like legislative advocacy work in that space, but otherwise, I don't know if any of the other panelists have ideas.
I was
specific
just
volunteer
gonna suggest the
opportunities.
Women's Center for Advancement, but I'm unsure in terms of how much advocacy they do related to that work, but obviously, I know they do a lot of work within that realm, so that's really all I have.
This conversation and you asking the original question of how do we become better advocates, I think a big thing that I think about a lot of work, because we're talking about democracy building and how fragile this is and how important it is I think the first step is being really responsible stewards of the messages that you amplify, whether you do that implicitly or explicitly, maybe on like how we use social media. So like I feel like Chueqa, we're like really living and breathing the voter ID stuff right now, because it feels like this is the biggest problem that's in front of us right now, and it's been pretty much what we've explicitly dedicated our organization to for the last year. you all feel that too, but like I don't know everything about, especially everything I care about, and so I have to like really trust like really good information, and I want to make sure I'm looking to speakers who are responsibly stewarding like good information, so I kind of like know the direction to go with it. So I guess that's my soft thing about misinformation, disinformation, just be thoughtful about the messages you're amplifying.
Yeah. So we've touched on a couple of key topics. I'll take your question now before I move on.
My question is, I have a lot of friends who don't feel part of, what am I trying to say? They just don't feel a part of what's happening in our country right now. And of course, me being a retired educator, saying, well, whose fault is that? If you don't read, if you don't, discuss things. I took a leap of faith, and this coming Tuesday, I'm driving all the way to Lincoln to meet my senator, Senator Sanders.
Good job.
At it's a champion club, woo-hoo, and I'll have a chance to sit across from her and actually look her in the eye. And my questions, being a retired teacher, is I'm going to ask, what are your views on education and funding? And the voter ID thing is also way down on my list if I have a chance. I'm sure I won't, because I'm sure it'll be a table of 12. There'll be other people wanting to ask questions. But, sometimes we just don't do enough. We just have to force ourselves or get involved. So I hope I learned something.
So I think that you bring up a great point. I think something that I learned through my work was that there's a lot of barriers for people for that education piece. So I guess for the panel, I want to ask, what would be a good starting point for someone who wants to get involved in some type of work, whether it be voter ID, abortion rights, whatever it may be? What's a good starting point for someone who wants to get involved?
May I speak?
Yeah.
When you were talking about school funding, it made me think about yesterday how I at 1:30 p.m. I turned on I started watching the revenue committee in the state legislature, and it went, I finally gave up at 5:30, but it went, I don't even know how much longer it went, but it was, they have the proponents and then they have the opponents, and I think that one thing you could do is to find the time to, well, first of all, if you have the time during the day to watch any of those, to do that, because they're more interesting than you think they're going to be, at least the ones that are like that. For me, it's like the proponents speak first and you're going, that is so right. And then the opponents come along and you're going, oh my gosh, I had no idea, but you're right, you're even more right. And that's exactly how I felt about this bill that was up yesterday, because they call it the Opportunity Scholarship Act or something like that. And it was like, when I started hearing the opponents, I'm like pretty horrified, honestly. And so I would love for you to talk to her about that. I'm sure she's very much in favor of it.
Did you know that you can go to, like when the education committee is meeting and they're being grilled, 24 hours before that, you can sit in the comfort of your home and watch it, but you also can go online and have your opinions and your comments printed in the public record.
Yes.
But you have to do it before.
That's new, that part of the public record. As of this year, it's new. But tell me again about the 24 hours ahead of time. What
Yeah, I thought that was strange too, but in order for it to be in the public record, it has to be.
Oh, right, yes.
It's noon the day before the hearing, the business day before the hearing.
Right.
Yeah. So,
But that you can still do it afterwards, but it won't be in the record.
I'm thinking also the sunshine laws, like, so many people cannot watch these live, and at this point, that's still the only way to see this, unless some terrific organization, does a live.
I'll add to that. I don't know if anyone's familiar with, I believe it's called the Nebraska Legislative Study Group. That's what they started to do, and they must have gotten permission.
Do they do all of them though?
I think they try to, but they don't
They get the most
necessarily get
exciting
all of them. But the Nebraska Legislative Study Group has recordings that you can go back and watch of committee meetings as well as the legislative session when they meet in the morning, afternoon, when those
Okay, good.
kick off. Yeah. So.
You know what, I didn't realize they did it for so many of them, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been rather disgusted recently with petition drives. I mean, I can understand the legislature clarifying what voter ID means. I think that needs clarification. However, raising the minimum wage, that's easy. We voted to raise the minimum wage. We didn't vote to raise it for 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds. We voted to raise it for workers.
Yeah.
So we voted to increase Medicaid, and it took 3.5 years to figure out something we already voted for. So I feel like it's a catch-22. Yeah, this petition gets it in front of the legislature, but that's really all it does.
Right.
Because they can monkey around with it for years until,
You don't have to
excuse me, a group of old white males
Hey.
decide what's gonna happen for the rest of the state.
And it was really strategic the way they wrote it. They definitely took notes from states who succeeded in this. The goal was to implement voter ID, and they took notes from other states who failed at the implementation and ones that were successful. What they could have done could have been a more simple, thing you were voting on, similar to, do you, I forgot though, it's always repeal or hold or something, is kind of confusing language, but it could have been do you want the minimum wage to be increased? Yes, no. Do you want photographic identification as issued by the Nebraska State DMV to be in place? Yes or no? But the problem is people don't agree on what version of voter ID. We even see that division inside one party, they don't agree on how severe or not severe it wants
And I can understand that. I mean, I can understand the voter ID thing. I am completely baffled on the minimum wage.
Yes, the amendments that are, not amendments, the bills that are being introduced to basically exempt certain, types of people from qualifying for that raise. I think that's a really good opportunity to let your voice be heard.
We are in the second house, remember?
I had my representative on speed dial.
Yeah. And I don't mean to be cheeky when I say this, but we technically have the most efficient state legislator in the entire country. We have a unicameral, every bill gets a hearing. That blows my friends' minds who are elected officials in other states, because they're there's no way in the state of Michigan every bill's gonna get a hearing, no way. So I just think we have to remember that when I've asked my friends who work in offices as aides or they are elected officials, I ask how many times your constituents actually reach out to you, and the numbers were shockingly low. Controversial bills, maybe 200. Any other bill, maybe 30. And so I'm just wow, that's so sad, because I feel I'm writing a lot of letters. I hope, do I have 20 other friends who are writing letters? Maybe. And so I just think that's why we have to be stewards of those messages. And if you care about that and you can get 5 people, that's what we always try to say, can you vote, and can you go get 5 other friends to go vote?
That's advocacy.
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to think of is what can you control? All you can control is that you're not saying 5 feet around you, and I don't know. So I'm pissed about, I'm very mad about that bill as well. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to get people, especially people who have different stories than me. I'm almost 30, this doesn't affect me. I'm a salaried worker at this point in my life. So you want to mobilize people who this would actually affect. Maybe they don't even know it's going to affect because they don't watch the legislature every day like Linda and we do. You know what I mean? And so I think that's your duty as a watchful citizen in the most efficient legislature in the whole country, to get people to use their voice. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like we have time for one more question.
I'm not sure this is a question, but it's a concept. I hear our legislators, a lot of them say that Nebraska is a pro-life state, and I strongly disagree with that. I think if there was an election, that most of Nebraskans would vote for a woman's right to choose. Is there any talk at all that a referendum could be put on the election ballot in 2024, like they did in Michigan, where the citizens of the state of Nebraska could put into the Constitution that protects a woman's right to choose? I mean, if you put a bunch of these in the 2024 election to get young people to vote, the right to smoke weed, the right to choose, any number of things that would make
I don't know what I'm using it.
get young people to vote, that would really be, I think, a good movement. But basically, is there any talk about getting a referendum on the ballot in 2024 that would protect a woman's right to choose as a constitutional amendment?
I think with the, not here, but I feel the ambivalence that when you had to choose who to vote for in the play that we just watched. I have ambivalence for that question a little bit because I know the realities of voter disenfranchisement. I know who frequently is like a voter that's going to show up, and I know the people who can't for very systemic, intentional reasons. So I'd be really nervous about putting civil liberty, on the ballot, because that's why we've had questions about, like, should fairness ordinances be put up for ballot, vote, should,
But Kansas did, and
Yeah.
60%.
yeah, it proved that Kansas was not a state that wanted to abolish the woman's right to choose. I don't think Nebraska is much different than Kansas, to be honest.
I think a point made earlier though, just about ballot initiatives generally, is they cost a lot of money to run, and more money than it is to run for office in the state of Nebraska. They usually require tons of volunteers, and also because there's so much scrutiny over the signatures in the process and like the legality of what you're doing, like it would be a huge undertaking, I think, especially in 2024 when we have voter ID theoretically. So I don't know, but I mean, I look at my friends in Kansas too, and I'm like, thank God. And kind of also feel an ambivalence, but also sort of similar, like, I think that'd be an easy way to like guarantee it, but at the same time, would it actually be easy in a state like Nebraska? No.
Well, I have a million questions still, as I'm sure you all do as well. But I think that's all we have time for, so thank you so much, all of you, for being here.
Again, these groups are the League of Women Voters and Civic Nebraska, so please see their websites, reach out to them, help fund their project.